Welcome to another edition of the Day After Podcast, obviously a video version of the Day After Podcast. I'm Jared Johnson. I'm joined by the Mighty Joe Yeager. Well, Mighty Joe, man, on one hand, there's not a whole lot to say. On the other hand, man, there's a ton to say about Texas Tech's 59-35 home loss against Baylor, a team who had lost 8 consecutive Big 12 games leading up to the matchup against Texas Tech.
Yes, I mean, look, you schedule your homecoming opponent for an opponent you expect to beat, obviously.
Right.
So, I mean, now you were a little bit more onto this than I was, because I really thought that this was going to sort of go according to the script that a lot of people have, that Texas Tech was going to kind of roll in this one. It seemed to set up pretty well beforehand for Texas Tech, and you thought it was going to be a tighter game, and you were closer to it than I was, but none of us called a 24-point loss.
No.
That's for sure. So It was just, I mean, it's hard to point to any area of the game in which Texas Tech played well. Okay, I mean, they were kind of bad in just about every area.
Every phase.
I mean, I think there were individuals who had pretty good game. Caleb Douglas, for instance.
Who else?
And there's not a whole lot. I mean, Jacob Rodriguez had 13 tackles. But he wasn't. I mean, even the linebackers who had been the strength of the team were not making a lot of big disruptive type plays, which they had been in the past. Forced fumbles, tip passes, tackles for loss. This and that and the other. And there wasn't much of that last night. Baylor's lines, both of them, basically controlled Texas Tech's lines. There wasn't any penetration. There wasn't any pressure on the quarterback. Man, I mean, that was. I mean, looking back at it now. And it's been a struggle all year long in that area, but it looked like in the previous game against Arizona, they were starting to figure some things out. But back to scratch and back to ground zero on that one, because it didn't happen last night. So you can go on and on.
Yeah. If you go back, I don't know if you could hear it or not because of the audio distortion, but one of my 3 keys was defending the run. That Tech had done a good job of defending the run. That had at least, even though they struggled so much in pass defense, they had done a really good job, especially in Big 12 play, in run defense. And that Baylor had come in here 2 years prior and really pushed Tech around to the tune of like 232 yards or something like that on the ground. And I just felt like that coaching staff was going to come in and try and do the same thing. Lo and behold, that's what they did. And, I asked McGuire about it. I said, look, I mean, you played with a lot of emotion, physicality during that 4-game winning streak. And it just wasn't there Saturday against Baylor. And I asked him to explain that. He mentioned some weird energy. But I also think, looking back on the schematics, I think they got out-coached.
Okay.
And I think what we've seen with this team is when they're put in a good place, like in the right place, in the scheme, and they believe in the scheme, I think you've talked about before, they play pretty fast. And you could tell the 3-man front, 3-man rush, dropping 8, for whatever reason, the personnel, first off, philosophically, I think a lot of people just don't believe in that. But also, the players apparently don't like it either because they did not play fast. But it wasn't just that. Offensive line got whipped. Taj Brooks, of all people, he finished with a good stat line. But you and I were kind of looking at each other like, what is this? This is a weird game from Taj in terms of he wasn't seeing the field, the holes very well that were there. He made some good runs. I mean, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, touchdown run was a nice one.
It was a nice one. He had a couple where he bounced out and made nice plays, but and there were times he ran hard. I'm not saying I'm probably being hypercritical of Taj, but I'm just saying it points to the weirdness of things didn't look or feel right from the get-go, and even Taj Brooks was part of that. Baron Morton threw his first interception of Big 12 play on a terrible read and a terrible throw. But I do think the Baylor coaches, you got to tip the cap to Baylor and the players. They clearly were more they wanted the game more from the opening kickoff. And just like I said in the post-game live chat, speaking of kickoff, special teams. That was another one of my big things is like continue to play great special teams. That would be huge in terms of winning and stop the run. And Tech failed miserably in both those aspects. But it wasn't just against the run. Baylor really could have named their score. When you talk about naming your score, doing whatever you want, Baylor's offense just had their way with Tech's defense. They could. I thought the one thing I didn't agree with McGuire was he said he wasn't going to wave the white flag. He was going to call timeouts. He was going to go for it and all that. And he said that was the reason why Baylor was at. No. The reason why Baylor put up 59 on you is because you couldn't stop them. And even when their backup came in, he ran all over you and did things. So Baylor really, a lot of times this is overused, but they could have named their score, and they did. They just had their way with Texas.
Yeah, and on the flip side of that, when Texas Tech was scored a couple of garbage points, touchdowns late in the game,
right,
that was against second and third string guys.
Yeah,
if they had kept their main guys in there, those points wouldn't have happened. You can't. No, I'm not buying that either. But going back to the running game a little bit, how weird is it that a guy named Bryson Washington, who nobody had ever really even heard of, had a better game than Taj Brooks, and Taj wasn't bad or anything like that. Although he was tentative and kind of dancing around in the whole early in the game. He got better as the game went on, but Bryson Washington, who really hadn't done much of anything, averaged, I believe, 4.3 yards per carry coming into this game, averaged 11 against Tech. And
we had that one big run.
That one big one. And, that's just really, I think, probably sums it up right there as to how unpredictable this game was. Yeah. And how it was so off script. And McGuire himself said at the press conference, the strength of their offense had been the passing game. Yeah. We didn't expect them to try to run. We had been stopping everybody who ran the ball, and then all of a sudden, boom, they're hitting them with the run. Yeah. And I think his words were, "Where's this ball going to hit?
Where's it hitting?" Yeah.
And they were confused. I think the scheme and the running game for Baylor may have been the biggest problem of all. They were doing something there that they just weren't ready for. And overall, I think Tech was geared up defensively for the passing game more than the run in this one. And, you guessed wrong there. You got scalded.
I agree with you. But then again, even McGuire said they went 10 personnel, so empty backfield, and were able to just dice you up that way. So they had you coming and going. They were getting after Texas Tech. So I do agree with that, with what McGuire said, what you're saying about that. But all the way around, whether it be schematics, the actual physical, just mano a mano, all the way around, it was a butt whipping, which is how you get a result like such a surprising result, like 59-35. And I see the reactions, and I know that first off, it's your fandom. Do with it whatever you want. Who am I to tell you? But for me, all I can do is speak to what I think about this. I think it's alarming. I think it should be heavily criticized, but I also think it's college football. Especially big time, big boy college football. You're going to get out schemed. You're going to have a team that's desperate to win, kick your butt sometime. You're talking about an in-state conference rival, no love lost between the two. They're probably like, "Oh, you have us for homecoming?" Okay. They had a bye week as well to prepare. They had to win that game, and they played like it. And Tech had been playing like that, starting with North Texas. It's what we had talked about is where's that emotion? Where's that physicality? And we saw that for that 4-game stretch. Really culminating with Arizona, where it was Tech played desperate to win that game. I think they got tired of hearing the road woes narrative and all that stuff, and they went out and played with a chip on their shoulder. A lot of the talk leading up to the Baylor game was self-scout, which you're going to get that in the bye week. Don't get me wrong, I get that. But it was about what Tech had done, feeling really good about the team. Baylor's coach is literally, coaching for his job. They're already talking about Joey McGuire replacing him as a possibility in Waco. Emotion is a big deal. Whether it be preparing with schematics and how you approach the opponent, and also just with ultimately the most important thing, how the players play with it on the field. And it was, here's Baylor and here's Texas Tech in both those regards. And what the result is just a flat out butt whipping. And I don't think that Baylor's that good. I don't think Tech's that bad, but they were on Saturday, and that's what mattered Saturday. I think moving forward, it's going to be important to see how does Tech respond at TCU. I believe that the kickoff's been announced for 2:30 next Saturday or this Saturday in Fort Worth. How do they respond? I mean, TCU's coming off a big road win over Utah, which I don't know how big that is, but I think anytime you win on the road in conference, it's a big win. They're going to be amped up for this game too. So I think just like we said after ACU and Washington State, how they respond, here we are again.
Yeah, I mean, in this sport, sometimes you're the boot and sometimes you're the butt.
Yeah.
I mean, Tech was the butt last night.
Oh, man.
And they got
in the butt bowl.
In the butt bowl. Yes, yeah. Exactly right. And, that's just going to happen. I mean, unless you're, a helmet school or something like that, or just an absolute powerhouse, there's going to be a game or two each year where you just throw out a bomb and you're worthless. And that's not to excuse or anything. But,
no.
I mean, Tech doesn't have the sort of dominant talent that they can go out there and just expect to roll week in and week out. And so, I mean, I'm not really, doing the Chicken Little thing on this one. I mean, after Washington State, we all thought that, oh my God.
Well, it was ACU and Washington State, like, man.
I know. Yeah, and but still, I mean, we thought that, shoot, what are they going to win at all for the rest of the schedule? And then they come out there and then they just absolutely destroy what actually is a pretty good North Texas team. They lost to Memphis last night, but Memphis isn't bad either, 6-1. And then you get that 4-game winning streak. I think there is at least some hope that something similar will happen after this one, and you're going to see a different looking Texas Tech team against TCU. And obviously they'll need to be.
Yeah.
But if that happens and they go on another streak, then the wounds will get the salve on them, and people get over the butt hurt, and then they can still have a very good season.
A couple of things with the scheme on defense I kind of want to circle back around to. The 3 down linemen kind of bend but don't break, which I mean has worked at sometimes, but Tech then would send the house at a couple of times, and they just got burnt on that. Whether it be like Baylor saw it coming, they audible to a screen, or they had it, they knew it was coming and they went screen, or quick little dump off to a running back that wasn't even just a screen, and those plays could have been housed. I even said in the press box, like, that should have been a touchdown. Better skill player playing against a better team. They walk in the end zone. But there's still big plays for Baylor. And it kind of, as far as the chess match, was like, go ahead, send the house. My thing is, why not rush 4 guys or maybe even 5 instead of sending why does that have to be all or nothing, And I understand it's weird, it's semantics, but they simplified things in terms of right before pre-snap for Tech's defense so that the young guys can play faster, not as many things to think about. And I think that makes a lot of sense. And it's worked. But on the other hand, you can't just let teams pick you apart right before the snap, like they did against Baylor. So there definitely has to be some fine-tuning. It doesn't have to be all or nothing in either regard. And they're going to have to play faster and get more of a rush. But they also, it didn't work in terms of stopping the run either. So they have to they got to scrap the 3-man thing, except for maybe situations, whatever, to kind of switch things up. They need a 4-man front. It doesn't have to be 4 down, but a 4-man front, I think, on most downs. And, because I feel like Baylor and Texas Tech, I know J-Rod had 13 tackles, but a lot of those were just like, saving it from being big touchdowns or something. You know what I mean? Like, they weren't impactful plays, like you said. Both Baylor and Texas Tech schemed, your 2 inside linebacker studs out of the game. That can't happen. That just can't happen.
Yeah, and really, more than anything moving forward, it's the defense that concerns me.
Yeah.
And now it's finally dawned on me. I mean, I thought coming into this season that the defense was going to be pretty good. Now, I know you got a bunch of young guys back there.
You have injuries. Yes,
you got your injuries, although you got healthier last night, and you had your worst game of the season defensively, probably, even though you were the healthiest you'd been since the start of the season. So moving forward, the defense is this is the first time really since since McGuire has been here that I'm beginning to have some real long-term concerns about the defense and the direction that it's going. One thing is clear, like you said, the three-man front is not going to get it on passing downs. I mean, look,
or against the run,
against the run, yeah, but you're not good enough in the back end to cover for a long period of time. And if you rush three, then you're conceding the fact that the quarterback is going to have all day to scan the field, and those receivers are going to be able to run around and eventually going to find an open space and hit the ball, and that's and hit the play. So that cannot happen. I mean, you have to figure out some way, move hell or high water, to get some heat on the quarterback. And like you said, the bringing the house stuff is not working. I don't think most of those blitzes have worked very well all season long. Mikel Dingle has had some success blitzing, but I mean that's now on tape.
Yeah.
So I mean they're knowing that okay, if Dingle's in there, particularly if it's any sort of a passing type of situation, there's a good chance he's going to be coming.
Yeah.
So they're going to have to work on that and scheme around that and let him play in some run situations as well. Now, as far as the run goes, actually, I'm a little bit more confident about the run defense and the pass defense moving forward because I think what happened last night was a little bit of an aberration. I think there was something a little bit freaky and fluky with the schematics that Baylor was running. I don't think TCU is going to be able to pound the ball on Texas Tech. It was really the pass rush, what's going on the back end that's really got me concerned moving forward. And I think that's got to be the focus in the area where you got to get things shored up.
Yeah, and to your point, I mean, there were times Sawyer Robertson, who I think his career high for touchdown passes was 2 coming in, he had 4, I believe. Yeah. So he doubled his career high. Yeah. So I'm tired opposing quarterbacks breaking records, setting records against Texas Tech.
Yeah.
But anyways, he had time to first read, second read, he's just bouncing around. Third read, come back to the first read. Oh, he's open now. So, I mean, it's not even fair for the secondary in terms of how long, So it's almost like the idea was like, let's just hope that they make enough mistakes, drop passes, tip balls, we get turnovers.
Yeah.
Bend but don't break, holding the field goals in the red zone. And boy, it was just break. It was just broken.
Tech didn't get a turnover last night, did they?
No. And we hadn't even gotten to the special teams. It was like, now there's been some other special teams problems. Like, what was it? There was against Washington State, I mean, Tech really needs special teams to be a plus. They had the opening kickoff that was fumbled and lost against Washington State. But against Baylor, you had, Shanks out of bounds by Burgess. You had, and then that low line drive kick that led to the kickoff return, which was basically a touchdown, was down to the 1. Dre McCray, I mean, he looked like, honestly, like if you could prove that he was trying to throw the game based on the way he fielded that squib kick. So, I mean, I would squib kick if I see that, I'm like, hey, squib kick to him every time,
You kicked the ball out of bounds.
I forgot that.
35-yard line.
I mean, special teams was just as much of a disaster as the defense or anything else. I mean, and it had been terrific for the most part this season. So, I mean, that played obviously a huge role in the loss as well.
That was another bizarre aspect of the game.
It was.
It just didn't. I mean, you can just point to so many areas that you just really couldn't have predicted it to happen.
No.
I mean, if you've got thousands of people focusing on a game and offering their views and their predictions, you're always going to have, 1 or 2 or 3 people making the bizarre predictions.
Right.
And so forth. It's just a matter of numbers. But the vast majority of people looking at that stuff did not see really any of this stuff occurring the way it did, and yet it all occurred. I mean, it was like just bizarre thing after bizarre thing after bizarre thing occurring all in one game. And the special teams may have been at the top of the list.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, that had been, along with the inside linebacker play, the absolute strength of this team, and just getting to the point where you're just kind of counting on the fact that the Tech is going to win special teams.
Yeah.
And they're going to be a plus factor for you. They were the biggest minus factor out of a whole lot of minus factors. I mean, there was just, amateur night, man.
Well,
and they're not amateurs anymore. They get paid.
That's true. That's true. That's one of the things you pointed out, though, for Saul, was that their punt returner was really good. and that you actually thought, hey, I think that was one of your keys in the three keys in terms of like, watch out, you could lose yardage in the punt and punt return game, and boy, I don't even you, Mighty Joe, didn't foresee it being that much of a walloping on special teams. Now, who could have? Like you said, I mean, it was bizarre. And, McGuire said in the press conference there was a weird energy,
Yeah. What do you think he meant by that exactly?
I think he
felt that something was wrong.
They were cocky, is what I took from it. That the players were acting like, and I was worried about that. I didn't think sometimes that's overplayed. But it was enough there where he was like, yo, chill out. Don't, settle down a little bit. Don't expend all your energy before you get on the field. You still got to go out and play. That didn't work, obviously. But I had just a weird feel. I just kept getting worse. I kept off. I didn't have the balls to pick Baylor, and I sure as hell wasn't going to pick them to win by 24 points. But anybody that I talked to before games, whether it be around the radio show or in the press box and all that, I was like, man, I got a bad feeling about this. I really do. Like, it just something doesn't feel right. Part of it was the familiarity between the staffs. I felt like, them knowing McGuire. Now, you can say the opposite, but I was really worried about Baylor coming in and trying to out-physical Texas Tech. And that's exactly what happened. Not because Tech, if you look at the previous 4 games, have been very physical, really on both sides of the ball. Because I hear people say that Baylor just out-muscled Texas Tech and they're just bigger and stronger. I agree they out-muscled Texas Tech Saturday, but I just don't. I don't agree. I think they're pretty evenly matched, to be honest, in talent. Tech had shown an ability to win close games. Baylor had shown an inability to win close games. Now, that game wasn't even close either. So, like, Baylor had struggled in fourth quarters, and the fourth quarter was just, might as well not have played it, to be honest. I mean, you and I were like, can we go? I wish we could go. Of course we didn't, and we couldn't.
But I think a lot of fans did go.
And I don't blame them. Yeah. And I'm not I really, I don't remember leaving a lot of games as a fan. I don't. I've seen some stinkers for all the teams I care about. But I don't blame anybody for leaving. Like, time's too valuable to sit there and watch that,
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you have, I could excuse that a heck of a lot more easily than somebody complaining because they might get a bit of sunburn or something.
Come on. Then don't go to the game. If you're worried about that. Right. Wear a hat, something.
Yeah, when you got a great game going on, your team's playing well, and then you bug out because you're a little bit too warm, you gotta have any respect for that. But, like you said last night, I mean, if I didn't have to be there for most of that second half or much of the second half, I wouldn't have been there either.
Me
I was
too.
getting paid to do what I was doing, so I was there.
That's right.
And that's it. So, I mean, the team last night did not deserve the fan support that they got. I mean, and McGuire said as much. He said he was really, extremely disappointed, and you have all these fans turn out to give you support. It's all set up to be a great night for you, and then you do that. You leave that out there on the field. So, I can't blame the fans on that.
I think that's just beat down and disappointed. He literally buried his head in his hands like 3 times during the press conference. And I don't blame him. But that's about as beaten down as I've seen him so far this year. What's your overall thought just moving forward, Joe?
Yeah, well, like I said earlier, I don't think it's quite as – the game itself was awful. It was terrible. But I don't think – it's necessarily an indication of what to expect moving forward. Again, I think that 4-game winning streak tells us more than that loss last night. I mean, Tech had a bad one in them, and it came out last night. And they're probably going to have another terrible win them at some point on down the line. I don't think it'll be against TCU. I think you're going to see Texas Tech rebound. I haven't really figured out what sort of prediction I'm going to make for that TCU game, but I expect Tech to play well. Will they play well enough to win? I don't know. But they're not going to embarrass themselves again against TCU, I don't think. So, but by the same token, there are issues galore on defense in terms of pass rush and coverage back there. And to me, that's where they've really got to focus and get some stuff fixed.
And then was it Iowa State and Ames after the TCU game, I believe? Yeah. So if you're not careful, I mean, and could hypothetically Tech go to Iowa State and win there? Yes, but Iowa State's looking pretty tough. I mean, you could all of a sudden go from a 4-game winning streak to a 3-game losing streak, and then things start to snowball. So this TCU game, and it's always going to be important, don't get me wrong, but all of a sudden becomes very important in my eyes in terms of the total, like the outlook of the season. So, the stakes don't get, don't drop. They just keep getting higher, it seems like, and you hope that's the case moving forward. But I think this is a very important game of it is. But we'll have plenty of content leading up to it. Great Jaeger shots from you after the game. Mighty Joe, great stuff from you. Thank you. Thank you all for watching, and until next time.